All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos. And tonight, we have a very special stream brought to you by our brother, Pim Orso. So shout out to Pim. This is a sponsored stream, again, by our brother, Pim Orsos, where we're going to be diving into generational curses. What is the biblical theology on generational curses? Obviously, this comes up multiple times in the Old Testament, and this has been a way that non-believers, critics of Christians, often use pejorative language to characterize the quote-unquote God of the Old Testament, as if, again, somehow we are some Marcionite understanding, and there's different deities here, but how the God of the Old Testament would curse men's generations 3 times, about 3 generations deep. For Cain, it's 7-fold. And so we're going to be diving into what does the Bible say about generational curses? How do we understand what generational curses are? Does God really condemn generations to be cursed and damned? Or is it rather the consequences of the sins of the father? And so we're going to be diving into this and looking at, obviously, the theology of that God cannot do evil. God does not command bad things to happen. That would be contrary to the nature of God, and therefore it is not God condemning or cursing people. And we're going to see this general context, how we curse ourselves, that as we look through the Old Testament, and we're going to be looking at Exodus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers specifically, and what we're going to see is that the Bible specifically describes what the generational curse is. And this is going to connect then to how we understand the curse of Cain, which is going to connect then to all the fun historical examples that we're going to be diving into. So this stream, we got tons of information to get into, but we're going to begin by looking at the biblical understanding and teachings regarding these generational curses, but then we're going to be looking into black magic. What is black magic? Because what we'll find is that once we understand what cursing is, profanity, swear words, curse words, cussing, all this is going to interestingly become tied together, and we're going to be able to look then at also historical examples of quote-unquote cursed families. The Kennedys are brought up, the Habsburgs are brought up, but we're going to find that as the Bible describes, that a curse is really the consequences of the sins of the father. And so we're going to begin there. The generational curse is that the children actually inherit the sins of the father. And so we're going to go through, once we go through this intro, we're going to look at some of the biblical evidence for this. So therefore, to launch, the way that we understand God cursing generations is that it's due to the sins of the father. And so really, all these generational curses, as we understand them biblically, are not God condemning people or condemning a family or condemning a lineage. No, what it is that God is showing that the sins of the father, the sins of the man have long-term repercussions, consequences. This is indicative, again, the fall of Adam and how we understand Adam, right? Creation didn't fall when Eve ate the apple. Creation fell when Adam ate the apple, listening to Eve, turning his back on God. That is the sin of the father, quote unquote, Adam being a sort of primordial first father. And therefore, we then inherit the consequences. This is actually the sort of curse that we are all under in regards to the curse of sin. But I got to differentiate here. This is not the same thing as ancestral sin. I'm not guilty for what Adam did. This is the Orthodox teaching. The Augustinian doctrine is that Christians, that we are guilty. We are guilty just as Adam is for our sort of sinful nature. That is not the Orthodox teaching. The Orthodox teaching is Adam is guilty for what Adam does. I am guilty for what I do, but I inherit the dreadful consequences of the fall, meaning I have a sort of sinful nature. And that, in a sense, is a curse, but we can see indicative of how all curses work. And so when we look in some of these historical examples, it's going to be really striking to see that when we find examples of royal families all across the world, we'll find all of a sudden people getting into debauchery, incest, pedophilia, addiction. And what happens? The father, the lead of these families, falls victim to degeneracy, falls victim to sin, falls victim to stand outside God's will. What happens is those consequences then have dramatic consequences for the children. And again, the Habsburgs are going to be a perfect example of their incest, their debauchery, their maniacal sort of manipulations of power, that the Habsburgs went from the most powerful family, arguably in the world, certainly in Europe at the time, to no longer having any power. And this is indicative of the generational curse. The generational curse is not God cursing specific people. It's that men, when they choose sin, it has a dramatic and detrimental consequence both on their children and their children's children. And therefore, that is the generational curse. And this is why repentance and following God's will from a biblical understanding, this is how we make sure that we are not falling victim to generational curses. And one of the things that I found in preparing for today's stream was that I didn't realize that in Protestantism, at least, again, I'm not trying to make too drastic of a general claim here, but from what I saw on some of these different forums and stuff, is that it seems like there's a very popular sort of sentiment among Protestants who may feel that they have generational curses. And maybe not so much in the same biblical understanding that we're talking about. Basically, a generational curse is men falling victim to sin, and how that sin then has long-lasting consequences. And this is exactly what's going to fall victim to Cain in the story of Cain and Abel. And Cain will be a perfect example, an exemplary example of, again, this process of becoming the wanderer, stepping outside the family of God, stepping outside communion with the Lord. That's what sin does. And of course, his generation sevenfold are cursed due to him killing his brother. And so the will is going to be essential for today's discussion, because it's the will that is going to differentiate us aligning ourselves with God and God's divine will, and versus the black magic that we're going to see, which is all about individual wills being placed upon other people. And so it's very interesting when we start to look in. I got tabs pulled up of like different magical websites telling people how to do black magic, perform these curses and whatnot. However, they also will tell you very straightforwardly on these sites that promote magic that be careful, because when you perform black magic, which is always a cursing process, again, magic itself as a category differentiated from ritual, this is a general religious studies differentiation, you could say, is that whether you believe in any one religious tradition, the way we generally understand how ritual and magic are differentiated is due to people perceiving that ritual and miracles are aligning with God's will, as opposed to magic being my ability to manifest my own will in the world using magical and spiritual techniques. So magic is all about the manifestation of individual wills. Ritual, at least especially for us Christians, ritual is not magic, because ritual is us aligning our individual wills with the cosmic and eternal will of God. And that's then the whole point. So we'll be diving into, again, the curse words. There's some very interesting stuff regarding profanity, swearing, and cursing, and why we call these profane words curse words. Because it's actually, whatever curse word, profane word that you're thinking of, the reason why they are profane, as we'll see, it actually comes from Christianity in regards to things that transgress God's will. And so why is it that copulation and reproduction are okay, but the F word is off limits? And it's due to the actual vulgarity, right? Reproduction is not a sin. Sex is not a sin. But the way that the F word has been used in the English language is indicative of a much more vulgar transgression of these sort of boundaries. And so when we curse somebody, when you start cussing out somebody, and cuss is just the sort of American version of curse. So when we cuss out somebody, we're saying negative things to put evil on them, to put ill on them, because the curse words themselves are words that exist outside the sort of accepted vocabulary of God's will. That's really interesting. And so cursing, profanity, swear words is actually tied to the sort of general understanding of God's will, in that these words transgress the accepted profanity that we, again, the sacred and the profane, all this different stuff. But again, orthodoxy, we're trying to bring together the sacred and the profane. We're not trying to have these dialectical tensions, but it is Christianity that really began to put a focus on the profanity, or what we would call curse words, swear words, because you are then swearing curses on other people. And so you can find examples then in ancient Germany. I have an academic article on Ireland where they would have cursing competitions because, again, tied to magic, tied to all this different stuff. They believed that the ability of somebody to use curse words in these cursing competitions demonstrated a sort of powerful ability. It demonstrated wit, cleverness, and a sort of personal power, right? To sort of condemn somebody, to curse somebody. And so your ability to use curse words, cursing language, and basically, humiliate somebody in public through these competitions, this was seen as a powerful thing. And so we don't have cursing competition to the same degree now, but it is interesting to see how curse words and profanity are tied together to magic, black magic, the will, and then all the way back to a biblical understanding of what is actually a curse. A curse is really the following of a will, of a sort of, well, it's in a sense evil that's outside God's control. So God never wills curses. Curses are always willed by the people who are moving against God's will. And this is going to be essential for how we understand all this stuff. So, again, we're going to dive into all this. I got tons of articles. We got tons of information. So I hope everybody's here, got your thinking caps on, and ready for a stream. Guys, smash that like. We're going to take care of some housekeeping real quick so we can just get straight into the content here. First thing I want to do is, guys, we are in the midst of a lecture series on an introduction to world religions where we have gone through the first 3 lectures there on the theories of religion, indigenous traditions, and then Hinduism. All those are over at the website for members. So if you would like to support Church of the Eternal Logos and the work that I'm doing, please become a website member. There's a $5 membership, which will give you access to all the video content. I hope by this weekend I'll be coming out with a fitness membership where we're going to basically have a group of like-minded Christians, Orthodox, not Orthodox, it doesn't matter, but we're going to have a group where we can get together and encourage each other regularly about staying on our diets, staying fit, staying in shape, whatever you do. Maybe you like long distance running, maybe you like powerlifting, maybe you like bodybuilding, maybe you like CrossFit, whatever it is. That's going to be coming here soon. And then also I have a premium membership for $25 for those that would like to have access to our sort of premium members group where we meet twice a month. And now premium members have access to both the fitness video library and also the regular video library as well. If anybody would like to sign up for a one-on-one session, I have about a slot left for tomorrow. So if you'd like to sign up for a session tomorrow, or we can do the week after, I use that link right there. And then if anybody would like to sponsor a stream, again, we got this stream right here that we're going to get through on the generational curses. Again, a major shout out to Pim Orsos. He's the two-time, forget Dr. Disrespect. Pim Orsos is the new two-time stream sponsor. He sponsored the Khazarian stream, and he sponsored this stream on generational curses. So major shout out to Pim Orsos. Thank you so much for sponsoring this stream. and forcing my hand at doing some research and diving a little bit deeper into this topic. So if that's something that you would like to do, if you have a topic that you would like me to stream on and do some research on, feel free to sponsor a stream using that link right there. Okay, without further ado, let's get into today's stream. So I have, first what we're going to do is read a little bit about Cain and Abel. So we first got to understand Cain, the curse of Cain, the curse of Cain. What is this idea of biblical curses? Is God this big meanie who's commanding evil on top of people or families or whoever it may be, that there for multiple generations bad things are going to happen, mysterious deaths, addiction is one that we're going to find a lot, is that within these families that sort of, we would say, transgress a Christian understanding of morality and God's will, we'll find that the children, addiction, suicide, and very mysterious deaths occur very frequently. But before we do that, again, we're going to stick with our biblical understanding. So to do a quick overview, the Bible, we're going to be reading Genesis, Cain and Abel. Then we're going to be diving into Exodus 25, verse 20, or chapter 20, verse 5, chapter 34, verse 7, Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 9, and Numbers chapter 14, verse 8. Now, a generational curse is that the children will inherit the sins of the father. God does not cause evil. Why? Because evil, as orthodox, God did not create evil. Evil and good do not have equal, what we would call, ontological existence. Evil has a negative existence, meaning that it only exists in the absence of the positive attributes that God creates. We would call them God's energies. And so the absence of truth, truth being an uncreated energy of God, falsehood is not equal to truth, and they're battling each other out, or God can condemn falsehood upon people. Falsehood is a term to describe the absence of God's energetic truth, the same way that we understand heat and cold, thermodynamic energy. So the cure to generational curses is always repentance and following God's covenant. And that's why whether we look at Adam and Eve, whether we look at Cain and Abel, whether we look at Israel itself in the Old Testament, Israel itself is indicative of the sort of family of God, being within God's will, transgressing God's will, worshiping Baal, sacrificing children, doing X, Y, Z. Well, what happens? The diaspora, the temple's destroyed. They get conquered. Things like that. Negative things happen when we transgress God's will, and that is the generational curse. We're all under a generational curse to some degree, and that is why, biblically, generational curses are indicative of the long-lasting effect of sin going against God's will, and it's not just families, but it's also nation states. You see, the Bible talks about how God places all people of power in their positions. So you start thinking about Joe Biden right now. Perfect example of these generational curses. How? What? Patrick, what? Dementia Joe is a perfect example? Yes. Let me show you. So not only is his family, I would say we could see the sins of the father, Joe Biden himself, having a detrimental ripple effect on the children. We now see in the diary of one of his daughters that he was molesting her and forcing her to have showers with him. Memory eternal. His son died in war. Again, I'm not sure exactly how. I believe it's Beau Biden or something. How he passed away. And then, of course, his glowing son now is a drug addict, and he loves prostitutes, and he's hooked up in all these different evils and Burisma over in Ukraine and China. Hunter Biden's hooked up with all these different sort of very shady deals, right? So we see again sin destroying the Biden family. But at the same time, the nation itself, United States itself, in a way is a sort of family. And we transgressing God's will, our abortion, the homosexuality, the things that this country promotes, the Hollywood, we have transgressed God's boundary. And so, of course, God then allows us to be run by a man who has dementia and is allegedly a pedophile. He is in charge of the United States. But again, the Bible tells us why that is the case. That is the case because this is the generational curse of sin itself. We as a people, we as a collective people have been transgressing God's will for so long that this is what we deserve, right? We are led by the people we deserve. And so these generational curses are not just limited to families, but also nations as a whole. And God allows those to rule. And so we can see so start looking across the world, start looking at all these different families, start looking at, why is it that the global elite tend to not have that many children? Why is it that the global elite, it's, they're not very family friendly, which again is the generational blessing. What's the opposite of the generational curse in the biblical stance? Well, God will bless your lineage. He will give life to your seed. And that is the ultimate biblical blessing, is the children. It's the children. And so what do we see? Who is the number one under attack in the world right now other than the children? And who then we are called to protect them. And this is, again, sort of the last stand for us to sort of correct the ills and get right with God, is we got to protect the children while we still can. Right? Because once we let the children go, we've given away the blessing that God gives us. Because God's blessing is the children. And the curse, these generational curses, as we'll see, is these families end up dying off. They end up losing everything. There's one example of a royal family in Nepal where one of the insane children ends up shooting the entire family and shoots himself, and basically it kills the royal family. And they were killed by themselves. And you can only think, how does this relate to things that were going on within that family or whatnot? But we'll get into all that stuff here in a few. So if you guys have your Bibles, you can join me here. We're going to be diving into Genesis chapter 4. This is the description of Cain killing Abel. And so really what I want to do is read some footnotes. So here I'll just read the second half of this story. Obviously we all know Cain and Abel were brothers. I'll just read it all real quick, and then I want to read the footnotes and then start getting into these examples in the Old Testament of God cursing sinful fathers. And what does that mean, and what does the footnote say about all that? So chapter 4 in Genesis. Now Adam and Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man through God. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a shepherd of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Now in the process of time, Cain brought a sacrifice to the Lord for the fruits of the ground. Abel also brought a sacrifice from the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. The Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his sacrifices. So Cain was extremely sorrowful, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, why are you extremely sorrowful? And why has your countenance fallen? Did you not sin, even though you brought it rightly, but did not divide it rightly? Be still. His recourse shall be to you, and you shall rule over him. Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. Then God said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? He replied, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? Thus God said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it will no longer yield its strength to you. You will be groaning and trembling on the earth. Then Cain said to the Lord, my guilt is too great to be forgiven. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be groaning and trembling on the earth. Then it will happen, if anyone finds me, he will kill me. So the Lord said to him, not so. Whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. Thus the Lord set a sign on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod, opposite Eden. So what do the footnotes say here? Cain and Abel came into... Okay, here, let's skip that one. Both Cain and Abel worshiped the Lord and brought sacrifices to him. Okay. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift because Abel had a good and discerning heart. So again, we get back to the heart, because this is one a big point, right? When we think about circumcision, the first covenant versus the second covenant. Well, we still circumcise the heart, not the penis, right? That's first covenant. That's a physical marking. That's you know, that's the way things, how people were marked. Again, the Hebrew people in the Old Testament, God is making a covenant with people to reveal himself through space and time, which is obviously trying to enclose and create an exclusive group which he can reveal himself through space and time. Because how can the eternal and the infinite make himself clear within space and time other than choosing a group of people to be continued? Because if he's talking to the Chinese, he's talking to the Egyptians, he's talking to these people and these people and these people, how's the message maintained? How's the full revelation received? Well, he chooses a people, he moves through. So the circumcision of the penis is a physical demarcation between them and the non-Jews. Well, with the second covenant, Christ dissolving the boundary between Jew and Gentile, circumcision is of the heart, which it was always meant to be. The telos, it's always about the heart. And so we see here that God recognized the heart of Abel. Again, his will and desire to be in line with God. Cain, on the other hand, Abel discerned through faith the Lord's commanding incarnation in his sacrifice as a lamb for the salvation of the world. The Lord rejected Cain and his gifts. Why? The inward state of his heart was not right with God, as in 1 John 3:12 says to him, who was of the wicked one. His passions are described in Jude 11 as the way of Cain. Cain's way was characterized by his sinful passions that dominated him, right? And so our passions, we have to use our will to get ourselves in line, to align ourselves with God. And if we allow our will to this please our passions, we are led by our passions, and we ultimately are going to become sinful and transgress God's will. And so that's where addiction and all these different fetishes and these negative consequences, this is where then the generational curse begins. As soon as we get outside the purview of God's will and we start acting in sinful ways, now we are beginning the generational curse. We're acting like Cain. We're acting like all these other people. So, because the Lord loved Cain, though, let me continue reading. So, Cain's way was characterized by his sinful passions that dominated him. One of these was extreme sorrow, made manifest in his fallen countenance. His arrogant worship was rejected, and he fell into the opposite condition of extreme sorrow. Whereas godly sorrows leads one to humility and repentance, extreme sorrow nullifies both. Interesting right there. Because the Lord loved Cain, he sought to bring him to repentance. He commanded him for not having the right worship, but reproved him for not having a right heart. He commanded him to still his heart through repentance, for it is filled with turbulence because of his passions. He also commanded him to be his brother's keeper, as this is what is meant by the words recourse and rule, as the eldest was the responsible for Abel's welfare. So we see Cain gave up his responsibility. And that's exactly why it's about the sins of the father. Because the man within a Christian context is the one that is responsible, right? We have different roles here. So the man occupies the responsibility for the protection and the well-being of the family itself. This is why Cain being responsible for Abel, and then using this example, this archetype, for all the different examples of the sinful father and the generational consequences. Okay, so some of the famous examples people use is like Numbers 14:18. Let's flip to that real quick. Numbers 14:18 reads, "The Lord is long-suffering and abundant in mercy and truth, taking away lawlessness, wrongdoings, and sins. But he would not cleanse the guilty by repaying the sins of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. Remit the sin of the people according to your great mercy, as you were merciful to them from Egypt, even until now." So people say, oh my gosh, that God of the Old Testament, oh my gosh, he's going to curse to the third and fourth generation. No. If you go down here and you actually read the footnotes, what it's talking about, actually, the footnote, they don't have the footnote for this particular verse in this one. Let's move to, we'll go to Exodus. So Exodus 25, if you guys are with me. Move to Exodus chapter 20, verse 5. Exodus chapter 20, verse 5. And here we have, "You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, recompensing the sins of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments." Now, they always miss the second one, but you hear a lot of non-believers, "Oh, your God, he's a jealous God. I can't believe you worship a jealous God." Well, again, if you read the footnote and how we actually interpret, that's why interpretation and hermeneutics is so important. Guys, smash that like for everybody still here. God is without passion. So God isn't necessarily a jealous God. God doesn't experience human emotions and human passions. Now, Christ did, but in regards to the Godhead, the three persons of the Trinity, no, God is passionless. So God is without passion, but he condescends to call himself a jealous God to show the intensity of his love for man. Therefore, let us love him with intensity, for this is very pleasing to him. And that's from John Chrysostom. So again, we see that God says that the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, those who are, again, transgressing his will, because if you love God, you keep his commandments. And so he says, but showing mercy to the thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. Why is that important? Because God's grace is 1,000 times longer than, quote unquote, his wrath. And his wrath is only allowing the consequences of your own decisions to play themselves out generation after generation. That's what he's talking about. And so again, we can flip over to Exodus 34:7. This is another one that's often used. Exodus 34:7. And it says, preserving righteousness and showing mercy unto thousands, taking away lawlessness, wrongdoing, and sins, and he will not clear the guilty, visiting the lawlessness of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. So we see it again, the third and fourth generation. Now this says, the Lord proclaimed, that is the Son, the Word, the Logos proclaimed the Father and revealed things concerning him. For example, the Father is true, and that he is the true God, the Son and Word is the true God of true God. Okay. Let's go to Deuteronomy 5:9. Deuteronomy 5:9. This is another one that's used often. Deuteronomy 5:9. And we read here, you shall not make yourself an image. This is beginning with verse 8. An image, neither any likeness or anything in heaven above, or in the earth beneath, or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them, because I am the Lord your God, a jealous God, repaying the sins of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands who love me and keep my commandments. So obviously this is also used to try to discredit iconography, but again, if you have an Orthodox Study Bible, there's multiple beautiful passages here to show you about this whole idolatry, that when God commands to the curtains, building the ark, surrounding the Ark of the Covenant, and the altar inside the temple has cherubim and seraphim on there. And so we see that imagery, art, is used within the places of worship in the Old Testament itself. That's not the same thing as an idol, believing it to be a god and offering sacrifices to it, be it Moloch or Baal. These are two separate things here. Again, nuance is important. And so if you have an Orthodox study Bible, it will lay all this stuff out for you. And so anyways, those are a few of the verses that people point to of God cursing the generations of sinful fathers. Okay, so now let's look at some of these examples again that I tried to show you. So what is the curse of Cain? The narrative of the curse of Cain is found in the text. Again, we just read this, Genesis 4-6. The curse was the result of Cain murdering his brother. Yes, we know this. The blood hit the ground, and since the earth was left drinking Abel's blood, it gives a two-part sentencing to Cain's curse. The first concerns the earth that was abused by Cain's blood. Should Cain attempt to farm the land, the earth would not yield to produce for him. This may imply why he went to build cities. Oh, interesting. We see again a relationship between cities, agriculture, and things like that. Again, don't want to go too far in it, but interesting point there. The second part of the curse marks Cain as a fugitive and a wanderer in the Hebrew. The combination making up this Hebrew phrase, fugitive and wanderer, is unique in the Hebrew Bible. Modern interpretations of the Hebrew verse 12 suggest Cain went on to live a nomadic lifestyle and that he was also excluded from the family unit. And this is indicative of what happens when we transgress the will of God. That's what this is showing. That is the generational curse. You and I can cause this curse upon our children. You and I may be under a sort of quote-unquote generational curse of the sins of your parents or your parents' parents. But you see, God has infinite mercy, and his grace, as the verse shows, is 1,000 times greater than the curses due to our own choosing, our own willful transgression and choosing. In the Septuagint, the emphasis on Cain's curse is dramatically increased by the combination of the Greek particles steon, kai, tremon, groaning and shaking upon the earth. Okay, anyways, we get it. So what I want to do then is let's get into then what is a curse. What is a curse? So now we've got the biblical aspect. Now we're going to be moving, transferring what we're doing into now black magic, historical magic, magic itself, curses generally speaking, not the biblical understanding of Christ, because now we understand that the curse is our own choosing. What is the history of folklore, magic, and curses? And so here we can see folklore and fiction. What is a curse? Like charms, curses are expressions of folk belief and verbal lore. Moreover, Jonathan, there's going to be a few scholars' names here. Don't worry about it. Jonathan Roper's definition of charms also works for their negative counterparts. They are patterned traditional utterances performed in specific context. So we see curses are spoken. Curses are spoken. They are sometimes accompanied by gestures and accessories. They are credited with the power to bring about changes in the health, fortune, safety, and emotional state of an individual or group. With these similarities on board, we can begin to look at curses a bit more closely. So Natalie Underberg, who has looked at like folk religion in Brazil, I believe, or at least somewhere in South America. Well, I looked her up on see what type of stuff she publishes and what her scholarship is on. So she makes a few points that identifies and discusses several curse motifs in folklore and literature, curses that result in the creation of outcasts like Cain. Obviously, now we have our biblical study. All the stuff we're going to read from this point forward is not coming from an orthodox or a biblical understanding of what these curses are. These curses are generational repercussions due to sinful activity. Cursing competitions that require feats of verbal dexterity, like the ancient Germanic flitting and the Irish cursing matches popular in the early days of Christianity. And so I went and found a very interesting article right here that I'm going to share with you guys. If you want to read this, this is an academic article on Irish cursing and the art of magic from 1750 to 2018. So it's a little bit earlier, right? This isn't at the same time at the beginning of Christianity, but it's a pretty interesting article. We're not going to be diving into it because it's too long, but I want to read this abstract to you guys. So again, this is where we're going to connect cursing, the transgression, swearing, trying to put my will, ill onto somebody else. It begins with these cursing, and this is tied to the art of magic. So let's read this abstract real quick. This is again on Irish cursing and the art of magic. Fairies, leprechauns, banshees, witches, holy wells, and rural remedies. Historic Ireland is famous for its superstitions, magic, and alternative beliefs. Yet we should not ignore what was once the most widespread magic of all: cursing, a righteous occult tack, a dark prayer for terrible pains of blight, evildoers. Stop. There we go. Evildoers. Cursing was unnervingly common from ancient times until the mid-20th century. This article explores its neglected modern history since the late 1700s by carefully scrutinizing the Irish style of cursing, relating it to wider social and economic conditions, and making comparisons with maledictions elsewhere. Irish imprecations can be analyzed using familiar academic categories such as belief, ritual, symbolism, tradition, and discourse. However, by repurposing an older way of thinking about magic, I argue that historic Irish cursing is best understood as an art because it required knowledge, practice, wit, skill, and composure. Intimidating, cathartic, and virtuoso. Cursing mingled gruesome yet poetic phrases and ostentatious rites in the name of supernatural justice. It had many applications, but was particularly valuable to Ireland's marginalized people fighting over food, religion, politics, land, and family loyalties. Cursing rapidly faded from the mid-20th century, and unlike other forms of occultism, was revived by the post-1970s New Age movement. Its unusual history underlines three wider points. One, magic can usefully thrive in modern societies, figuring in the most vital areas of life. Two, different styles of magic have distinct chronologies. And three, the most psychologically powerful forms of magic are subtle arts that deserve our begrudging respect. So that's what this article is about. Feel free to check out that article if you guys want to learn more about it. But we can see then how cursing, and I'm talking about profanity here, is tied to magic and the sort of ability for me to use words and sort of enrapture my ill will onto somebody else and sort of dominate them verbally. So wanted to point that out. Now, what was really interesting, here's a article here. I'll share it with you guys. This is, again, a general Protestant site. So I don't know if they accept ancestral sin or not, but they did kind of nail what we're talking about here in regards to generational sin, is that it's not what people often believe it to be, right? It's that what is passed down is the consequence of sinful action and behavior. Thus, generational curse is really a function of sowing and reaping passed down from the generation to the next. Okay. Well, I started looking, and did you know that there's a Christian pastor in Memphis, Tennessee, who's noted for swearing during his sermons? Now, I just thought this was so interesting because here I'm doing research on generational curses, and I'm finding out that black magic and curse words, swearing, and profanity are somehow tied to all this stuff. And then, lo and behold, I find this pastor in Memphis, Tennessee, swearing during his homily. You're not even going to believe the stuff that this guy says, right? We're just going to read this at the beginning of this article here. I'll share this with you as well if you guys want to read this whole thing later. Unreal. So again, what did we just talk about? Swearing is tied to magic and ill will, and this is about the transgression of God's will, and this is why Christianity from the beginning began to categorize these words as off-term, because they're essentially sanctifying language itself. They're saying, okay, here's these words. We're not going to condone swearing or cursing or putting curses on people using these sort of words, these profane words. So that's Christianity began to try try to sanctify the language, where we can see in some of these pagan cultures, the swearing and the cursing was deemed as sort of art, and that they had competitions for it. So we can see Christianity was stepped in historically to really divert this tradition. And yet here we have a Protestant minister or pastor in Tennessee. You're not going to believe the stuff he says. So it's reported that a Memphis pastor of a Christian church has become the cussing pastor. So really, cussing is the American form of cursing. So he's the cursing pastor, since he routinely curses profanely in his profanity-laced messages. Videos of his messages have attracted millions of viewers online, and he is telling his critics, F you, and that's obviously not what he's saying, as he also defends his decision to host a sexually provocative twerking contest at his church as well. So why do I bring this up? Because we can see the transgression of God's will, morality, and all these things. This guy, in the name of Christianity, is not only cursing, which we now have ties back to, again, magic and my ability to put my will onto somebody else, but he's also allowing, like, transgressive sexual dances, twerking competitions at his church gymnasium. I'm not kidding. And so here's his response to Christians and other people upset that he's allowing girls to have twerk contests in his church gym. I'm not kidding. So here's what he says. It's reported the cussing preacher said in a video posted on Instagram, quote, "This message is for all you hypo-Christians who live hypocritical and effed up lives when you have the nerve to judge someone else. I look at many of you who have criticized the young ladies who were dancing in my gymnasium in my church." Now, again, they were having a twerking contest. "I look on your pages and you got your ASS and your TITTIES out. You got all types of trash in your life, but you want to be the one to judge? F you, you mother effers who are out here judging. There is nothing in the Bible about dancing, but it is judging. Again, F you." So again, how could you imagine a pastor saying this? He's literally allowing girls to twerk in his church, and he's upset because people judged it to be inappropriate. Do you realize that twerking comes from strippers and like it's explicitly a sexual insinuation in regards to, you know, how pleasurable a woman might be at having sex with? Like, and you think this is something to be promoted at your church? Wow. So anyways, we're going to be moving on here, but I just wanted to connect this. How interesting, right? This is being done in the name of Christianity, which we just, again, we're tying all the cursing, black magic, generational curse. We're trying to tie all this stuff together. Anyways, folklore discussions on curses. Maledictions delivered by holy men or women like Saint Ronan, who cursed with swine with madness for obstructing his efforts to establish a church. Ritualized curses delivered by poets in ancient Ireland. Okay, yada yada. Okay, a few Carpathian curses. It occurs to me that I've written on newsletters. Invocations of God as the ultimate authority. Yada yada yada. Okay, really, we'll move on here. Now, again, regarding the cursing words, so placing a curse obviously isn't the same thing as uttering curse words, but both concepts start with the Christian church. Originally, the sense of curse as the, quote, expression, a wish that misfortune, evil, doom, befall a person, group, etc., wasn't so different from using profanity, which in the early sense is speech directed against God. That's why curse words are considered profane or too profane. They're too profane. There's a boundary here. This is what Christianity was trying to do, and then highlight words that transgress that boundary and go against God. So that's why then swear words, how does swear come to simultaneously mean to bind oneself by oath and to use profane oaths and language? The earliest swear words were identical to curse words, taking the Christian God's name in vain or speaking of acts that were considered sinful. While there's a general consensus about what some adult words are, such as the F-bomb dropped by YouTube singer, others are up for debate, yada, yada. Okay. Now, this is really interesting because if you start to look at the etymology, right, you can see how the words curse and swear, they begin to develop and have different concepts. So the distinctions between curse and swear are not always recognized because they have a clear usage overlap in the definition of foul language. So this is some of the earlier definitions. I mean, now again, they already have this huge overlap. But curse is used as a foul language with or without a direct object, while foul language meaning of swear does not normally receive an object except for the expression. Okay, John cursed the day he was born. Jeff swore at the umpire before he went back to the dugout. Now, when you what I thought was really interesting is that in the 13th century here, we see curse expanded to foul language. Originally, again, curse, to invoke or use a curse against, is often seen as if it is a family had been cursed. So originally, cursed was tied to these sort of generational curses. It wasn't necessarily associated with language. To swear was to make a solemn statement or promise undertaking to do something or affirming that something is the case. Okay, these were the original meanings and how they were used. But by the 13th century, the 1200s, curse expanded to include foul language. Late Old English curs, a prayer that evil or harm befall one, of uncertain origin, perhaps from the Old French carouse, anger. A connection with cross is unlikely, as other people have tried to claim. Because I'm not kidding, guys. There are people like these secular. This is a history of swear words. There's a book called Holy Shit. That's what it is. Holy S Word. And it's basically about a history of curse words. And I kid you not, they claim that the Bible says God wants us to swear. And they use Deuteronomy 6:13. By his name alone you shall swear. Right? Total quote mining. The verse reads, fear the Lord your God, serve him only, and take your oaths in his name. So it's not talking about swearing in regards to like using foul language, which the article was indicating. It's talking about swearing oaths using the name of the true universal God. That's what it's talking about. Anyway, so swear expanded to foul language in the 15th century by way of profaning a solemn oath. So Old English swearian, take an oath, in the Proto-Germanic swarajon. Anyways, to swear, to speak, talk, say, and so on. Also related to the second element in the answer, the secondary sense, to use bad language, developed from the notion to invoke sacred names and who it is that you're swearing to. Okay. So, now let's get into black magic and the magic of curses. What are curses? How do curses relate then to magic? Okay, so curses, before we even get into this article, like a curse is an express wish that some form of adversity or misfortune will befall or attach to one or more persons, a place, or an object. In particular, a curse may refer to such a wish or pronouncement made effective by a supernatural spiritual power, such as God or gods, a spirit or natural force, or else a kind of spell by magic, usually black magic or witchcraft. And that's exactly, see, black magic, as I'm trying to point out, is about my will being imposed upon somebody else for a detrimental purpose. And this is where we'll find, I don't remember which article, we'll find it here in a second, but it tries to make a delineation between white magic and black magic, white magic and black magic, and gray magic. I mentioned this with Jamie Hanshaw when she came on to talk about Hollywood and the Babylonian religion, is that this delineation between white magic or good magic and black magic, this is not Christian. We don't have these delineations. All magic is the manifestation of individual will, which is not the same thing as my will trying to align to God's will, and God's will then manifesting what he wills in my life. So I can say, Lord, I'd like a wife. You pray for a wife. But at the same time, I allow God's will to manifest that to some degree. I'm not actively, chasing or trying to make this thing happen. I'm not doing a love charm or a magical ritual, which again, if you look at some of these things, they do have love charms or ways to, get married or find the right spouse. And like, here's a whole page. This is a page literally telling people how to perform magic. Now, again, I'm not advocating, do not look this stuff up. It's not that important, but this is literally telling you how to help accelerate a breakup, how to deal with an ex, how to dismantle a romantic affair, how to permanently handle infidelity, how to make people develop intense hatred for each other. These are all magical spells. And so you can see this is diving into black magic, and it literally tells these people, hey, if you're going to participate in black magic, we're just going to tell you, again, we advocate for it. This website advocates for it. But it's also straightforward in telling you that black magic, usually when you perform these ill wills onto people, they will work, but bad things also befall you. And so you have to be ready for that. And that's why the black magic and these real deep forms of magic often lead to the destruction of the person who's doing it. And so it's almost like, and I found this looking this up, is some of the witchcraft, some of the descriptions of this black magic, as they're telling people, basically make sure that you really want to perform black magic for this purpose, because something negative is probably going to happen to you in conjunction with the negative things that are going to happen to the person that you're trying to cause harm to. So yeah. Anyway, so the curse, usually black magic or witchcraft. In the latter case, a curse can also be called a hex or a jinx. In many belief systems, the curse itself is accompanying a ritual, is considered to have some sort of causative force in the result. To reverse or eliminate a curse is sometimes called a removal or a breaking of the spell. Has to be dispelled and often requires elaborate rituals and prayers. And so, yes. So obviously, we're not going to combat black magic with another form of magic. We're going to, again, align ourselves with God's will, and God will prevent generational curses, stop a lot of these things, right? So that's our sort of refuge. Now, what's really interesting, you can find cursed tablets, right? I've only brought this up is because there's so many examples of ancient artifacts of writing curses on rocks, on papyri, on different artifacts, that we know that the ancient world was obsessed with these sort of magical powers and causing curses among people. Now, this, again, here's the thing on black magic. We could read a little bit about black magic. I mean, you're going to know most of this stuff here. Again, I don't subscribe to this whole high magic, white magic, low magic is black magic. No, that's dumb. This is somebody who actually promotes magic and then is trying to, again, like here's the thing with these magicians, like, oh no, white magic is good magic. It's like, it's for, based on what standard, what is your standard for what's good and what's bad? Oh, of course, it's Christianity. Anyways, the Malleus Maleficarum, this is a famous work that got going in the 15th century in Germany, documenting this is, the treatises on witchcraft. Now, this is a very controversial text, to say the least, because this is the time of, it's past a little bit of the Inquisition, but it's a mixture of things. So this is the 1400s. 1486 is when the Malleus Maleficarum gets going. And I want to tie this over to Maleficent, where we can see, again, cursing, black magic, and how all this stuff relates to generational curses. That's exactly what Maleficent is trying to do with the curse in Sleeping Beauty. That's exactly what she's trying to do. So, Malleus Maleficarum was a Catholic work describing by Heinrich Kramer, laying out some of the accusations of witchcraft and magic that was being practiced at the time. Now, what's so interesting, this is 1486, the Malleus Maleficarum, but literally in that same century, you have Florence, Italy, and Marsilio Ficino and Giovanna Piccadella Mirandola and Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa and all these different guys that get going in the 15th century promoting magic. And what they did is they began to add Christianity into the sort of perennial soup of magical worldviews. This is where we get Christian Kabbalah by Giovanni Picadero Mirandola and all this different stuff. But in the same century, they are persecuting people for performing magic, while over in Florence, Italy, literally the Academy, the Medicis are paying people to translate works on magic and dive deeper into magic. So very interesting stuff there. But I want to move over to Disney here and Maleficent. Now, Maleficent, as you know, you probably know her from the character that Angelina Jolie played. That's the more recent version of this movie. But Maleficent is a fictional character who appears as the main antagonist in Walt Disney's productions of Sleeping Beauty. She is represented as an evil fairy and the self-proclaimed mistress of all evil, who, after not being invited to a christening, curses the infant princess Aurora to, quote, prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and die before the sun sets on Aurora's 16th birthday. So what we see here is a woman, most likely postmenopausal, again, performing witchcraft, magic, the manifestation of her own will, and she is wanting to cause ill will and kill, basically, one of the princesses through a curse. Maleficent is based on the evil fairy godmother character in Charles Perrault's fairy tale Sleeping Beauty, as well as the villainess who appears in the Brothers Grimm retelling the story Little Briar Rose. Maleficent was animated by Mark David. Okay, yada, yada, yada. A revision of the character reappeared as the protagonist in 2014 live-action film Maleficent, portrayed by Angelina Jolie, who reprised the role. This version of Maleficent is portrayed as a sympathetic character who is misunderstood and trying to protect herself and her domain from humans. I thought this was so interesting, just from a biblical standpoint, right? So we know, again, as Christians, that God loves mankind. God, the second person, became a man within space and time. And so this demonic creature, this person, this Maleficent, this fictional character, right? She not only is embodied as a dragon at the end when she's really trying to sort of manifest her will, but we see so many of the motifs, right? The aged woman using her power, right? Does Maleficent have children? Right? Does she have a family she belongs to? Does she have grandgirls and grandboys that she's going to take care of? Of course not. She's a woman by herself, postmenopausal, manifesting her will on the world. This is the cat lady. This is the state of the 38, the 45, the 50-year-old woman who's single, who has no children, who has animals, who, again, what is she doing? We're all, in a way, performing our own magic by continually pursuing our own will. You see, magic is this using a ritualized form of connecting with the sort of spiritual realm to manifest your will. But every time we sin, in a way, we're doing the same thing. We're manifesting our will that transgresses the will of God. That's what sin is. And so we're all doing that to some degree. But isn't it interesting that Maleficent, this character, again, it embodies a sort of archetype here, right? The female, the witchcraft, eventually she takes the form of a dragon, right? A sort of reptile figure that's both terrestrial and aerial at the same time. It spews fire, right? So it burns things alive with the fire. Whereas we as Christians believe that God's love is fire. We're purified by the fire. The evil is trying to kill things through the fire, right? Anyway, I just wanted to tie all that stuff together. So here's a little fun thing that I really wanted to do is now let's look into some of the historical examples of families with eerie curses, okay? And when we look at some of these examples, like, first we could probably read this one on the Habsburgs, because I got a few articles on these family curses. Here's another one, the most famous curse in royal histories. Here's a few. We can read this one. I wanted to read this article because Shout out again to Pim Orsov. Guys, smash that like if you guys are here. Pim Orsov is responsible for sponsoring today's stream. And so he wanted me to speak a little bit about the curse of the Habsburg clan. And so we're going to read this article. And maybe we can dive into one of these family articles as well. I also have one on top 10 bloodlines with extremely disturbing family curses, right? Maybe we can go through this one. This is a really interesting one. Again, and the Lee family, did Bruce Lee do something to really transgress God's will? I don't know. I don't think so. But my understanding is that his death was due to like a production dispute and then how they killed his son, or whether that was intentional. That's obviously up to debate for a lot of people. So here is Curse Magic, right? This is a site that, again, promotes magic and telling people how to perform magic. And so curse magic or hex magic is a form of magic that allows the user to include additional lasting negative effects to spells. So it's all about casting negative effects on people. Description: this form of magic allows the user to include additional lasting negative effects to spells. The effects can range from dulled senses to debilitating sickness and even death. The user is unable to use this magic without the need of a grimoire. However, in order to use it at its full potential, specific spells are required, which are stored within grimoires. Curses placed on humans do not affect elves, even if they inhabit the same body. So you can see these people that are that are practicing these spells, they believe in a lot of wild things. All curses derive from the Megacula's power. The Agrippa family has studied curses for hundreds of years and is infamous for its curse magic. Now, Agrippa, what is that talking about? Henry Cornelius Agrippa, the Agrippa family. So, anywho. Here's another article I found. Negative magic. Is cursing/hexing acceptable? And this is a more of a middle of the road. But it essentially, again, this is another one. Learn religion. This is basically promoting it. Promoting magic as a way to sort of take control of your own spirituality, right? Here's a site. How to put a revenge curse on someone. Everything you need to know. So again, we are not advocating, but you can see where all this stuff is coming from and how it all connects. Initially, we all don't know how to put a revenge curse on someone, but time and life experiences beating us silly, we all learn how to eventually. So this person is advocating putting revenge spells on people. Where do revenge spells work? The author asks. When you're keen on voodoo magic for revenge, you've got to have access to comprehensive information. Voodoo revenge magic has the potential to support all your desires in multiple ways. It sounds like an advertisement for black magic. When you've been wronged, these spells can swoop into action, wreaking havoc where you want it to. Here's a look at some of the common ways voodoo for revenge spells work. Here's one to, as I said, dismantle a romantic affair, deal with an ex, help in accelerating a breakup, permanently handle infidelity, make people develop intense hatred, to pay a long-standing debt. And then the other one, how much blowback can you tolerate? Because here's the thing, which is agreed upon in all these articles I read on black magic, is once you start practicing black magic to cause negative effects on somebody, which we all believe can happen, you are also giving a piece of yourself for this to happen. So there's an exchange here, and the black magicians are telling other magicians this is the case. So if you're going to do a ritual and you want to cause ill will on somebody, you can perform a series of rituals and spells using certain incantations, certain words, and you can make this effect happen. However, this also is going to you're going to exchange a piece of yourself in return. And so that may be your own early death. If you do a ritual to kill somebody or cause death, that may happen, but for that to happen, you may also have to die in a tragic way. And this is the nature of black magic. And this is the exchange of to manifest my will. And this is what's so interesting when you start looking, like there's one of the articles, we'll look at John Paul Getty, right? The famous Getty Museum. I went to the Getty Museum when I was in California. Beautiful Greek architecture. It's a collection of all these ancient pieces, the Getty Museum. But his life, he found oil in the Middle East, and then it's plagued by all these misfortunes. Now, I don't know what he did or what happened or his beliefs or how his relationship to God. I don't know anything about that. Or the Kennedy family, right? The Kennedys are another example of a continual series of misfortune. Is it a curse? Did somebody do something? Are there things that are being continued? I don't know. But there's always an exchange. And that is true for all the sin, right? We're talking about black magic here, but again, what do we talk about the generational curses from a biblical perspective? Generational curses from a biblical perspective are due to men, fathers, becoming enthralled in their own sin, whether it be addiction, whether it be whatever. And those sins are going to have a ripple effect upon the children for the third to fourth generations. And so that's why we have to repent from our sins, stop doing those things, and then God can stop the consequences of those sinful actions through his blessings, through his energies, and his life-givingness. So how much blowback can you tolerate? Consider how much blowback you can stand before engaging a revenge enchantment. Some revenge spells could cause mild or harsh consequences you can't easily manage. However, other potent spells might have a heavier price tag overall later on. When you can closely consider what you can tolerate after a revenge spell on someone, it becomes more comfortable to cast. So, exactly that, right? Does voodoo obsession spells work? Obsession spells are very active, especially when cast via the hodopath. Now, again, I want to make a point here about contagion magic, right? Sympathetic. So this voodoo stuff, this is all based on contagion magic. Contagion magic has to do with magic, again, these curses that they do based on having a piece of you. And this goes back to Maleficent. Because how does she cast her magic? She has to have Princess Aura prick her finger on a spindle of a spinning wheel, meaning she needs the blood. This is a blood magic ritual. This is a black magic blood ritual. That's what this movie's talking about. And so here we can just read a little, let's see. So, on the evening of Princess Aurora's 16th birthday, after the three fairies have momentarily left her, so there's three good fairies, so there's three good, and is that a reference to the Trinity maybe? I don't know. Again, it's still fairies, it's still in a sort of magical fairy tale world, but Princess Aurora is surrounded by three good fairies. Meanwhile, the mistress of all evil, Maleficent, the bad fairy, wants her to die at her 16th birthday. So the three good fairies have momentarily let the depressed princess alone in the castle room. Maleficent visits Aurora in the form of a Willow the Wisp, luring the princess to a tower room where Maleficent transforms into a spinning wheel. Fulfilling the ritual, the fairies, realizing their mistake, pursue Aurora to the tower room, trying to prevent her from touching the spindle. Unfortunately for them, Aurora pricks her finger on the spindle, fulfilling the curse. When Flora, Merryweather, and Fauna arrive too late, Maleficent appears and taunts three of her arch rivals into defeating her. The evil fairy reveals the now sleeping Aurora on the floor, shocking the fairies as Maleficent disappears, crackling, leaving the fairies heartbroken of what happened. Later on, Maleficent and her goons, again, who aren't human, right? So the whole thing with Maleficent is she rules a world of non-human entities, evil, demons, right? Meanwhile, God loves humanity. Maleficent then rests, thinking that she has triumphed. Maleficent later wakes up, and by seeing that Diablo, again, Spanish for devil, right? Diablo means devil. That's the name of her partner bird. has been turned to stone. She discovers that the fairies have freed Philip from her dungeon. She climbs to the top of one of her castle towers, proceeds to blast Philip with lightning, and after the good fairies foil these attempts, she summons a forest of thorns. Huh. Could that be the crown that Christ wore? Huh? The crown of thorns? Through which Philip slices his way out. Enraged, she blows away and confronts him in the front of King Stephen's castle and transforms him into a huge dark dragon. And we already know, again, the symbolism of the dragon. The three fairies cast an enhancing enchantment on Philip's sword of truth, capital T, which he throws into Maleficent's heart, mortally wounding her before she falls off the crumbling cliff to her death. Interesting stuff. Okay, so let's read this article on the Habsburgs real quick. The Curse of the Habsburg Clan. Many members of the imperial family suffer from mental illness. The protruding jaw gives the face an ugly and disproportionate appearance. Okay, so the Habsburgs, for those of you who don't know, are one of the more important families of European history. The Habsburgs. House of Habsburg. So I'll share this. Guys, look this up if you're not familiar with the Habsburgs. Very important in regards to the history of the Holy Roman Empire, okay? There are often many obscure, mysterious, and sometimes frightening things in the history of every royal family that excite the minds of mystic lovers. Along with scientific and historical research, various speculations, legends, and rumors appear. Often mysticism and the irrational prevail over dry facts. The history of the Habsburg royal family is a vivid illustration of this. So there's always been a historical rumor, if you will. Guys, smash that like for everybody who's still here. There's a rumor that the Habsburg had a family curse. The Royal Habsburg dynasty has been, quote, at the helm for almost 10 centuries. It was founded in the 10th century by Guntram of the Rick, who owned lands in Alsace and northern Switzerland. The Habsburgs ruled countries such as Austria, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands. During the imperial period, their rule, they held the titles of emperors of the Holy Roman Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The period of their role in countries such as the Czech Republic, Hungary, Croatia, Mexico lasted until the beginning of the 20th century. The power of the dynasty extends over 2 hemispheres. It is therefore difficult to conclude that the Habsburg were losers punished by bad luck. The following story is told in connection with the curse. In the 11th century, Count Werner lived in the Swiss district of Aargau and owned Habichtsburg Castle. It is said that the castle gave the name to the whole family. The count seduced an ordinary girl, the daughter of a peasant, and promises to marry her, even though he is already engaged. A liar. The victim of his betrayal is imprisoned because she is pregnant. She gives birth in captivity and then soon dies, having previously cursed the whole family, and since then the curse has haunted the Habsburg dynasty for centuries. The favorite of fate. If we look at the centuries-old history of the Habsburg family, their leading position, wealth, and power at least correspond to the word misfortune. One of the most prominent representatives of the dynasty was King Charles V of Habsburg, son of Philip the Beautiful of Habsburg and grandson of the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I. Charles V was crowned the Pope as Roman Emperor. By the Pope as Roman Emperor, he has a huge inheritance. This gift of destiny manifested itself in the form of a possession of German lands, beginning with Austria. He acquired the Netherlands as the heir of Maria of Burgundy, his grandmother, who in turn was the heir of the mighty Karl the Bold. The Netherlands became a real treasure, a diamond in the royal crown, as it was experiencing economic prosperity at the time. On his mother's side, Charles V inherited all of Spain and increased his possessions were the lands of the New World in his time. Spanish America was colonized. Territories from the present-day Chile all the way to Florida, with the exception of Brazil. To the east, the dominion extends to the Philippines. Thanks to the powerful Spanish Navy, both military and commercial, the Habsburg practically controlled the whole world. the obvious drawback. If we look at the portraits of the Habsburg dynasty, such as Diego Valquez, depicting Philip IV and Mariana of Austria, we will be struck by the ugliness of their faces, despite the fact that the artist is undoubtedly trying to soften the ugly features. The appearance of the monarchs is obviously repulsive, and this is due to their incest, right? In the painting, so we'll just skip. This is interesting. Who painted the portrait of Carlos Habsburg, Charles II? The shortcoming is particularly obvious. This is the famous Habsburg jaw, an ugly, disproportionately large, deformed chin. Characteristically, Charles II is nicknamed El Hequizado, i.e. the damned. So in the minds of the people, the obvious physical defect of the Habsburg is perceived as a seal of a curse. Representatives of the Habsburg dynasty also have mental health problems. A typical example is the mother of Charles V, Juana the Mad, who is the Queen of Castile and the wife of Philip the Beautiful. It is said that Juana fails to bear the death of her husband because she loves him madly, and the loss makes her mentally ill. She was sent to a convent, and her father ruled on her behalf. The madness and decline of the family are most clearly manifested in the personality in the already mentioned Charles II, who suffered from many diseases from an early age. As a child, he could not walk alone. At the age of 40, he was finally rumbled. He was gloomy, distrustful, and angry, and constantly depressed. He had pathological tendencies and often took the bones of his predecessors from the tombs and exhumed them for hours. In the Habsburg family, marriages between close relatives are normal and constitute the ideology of those eras. Charles V was obsessed with the idea of creating a pan-European Christian empire where power belonged to a powerful family. The, quote, blue blood principle is at the forefront, which in turn leads to the manifestation of the curse. At that time, there were catastrophically many cases of miscarriages, and health of the babies born died before the age of 10. The collapse of the empire. The events of the late 19th and 20th centuries gave mystery followers many reasons to popularize their versions. A particularly valuable fact for them is the shooting of Sarajevo. Then Franz Ferdinand of Habsburg was assassinated. Heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, he belonged to the Habsburg-Lorraine branch of the dynasty. The outbreak of World War led to the fall of empires such as the Russian, German, Ottoman, and Austro-Hungarian. This is the most powerful collapse of empires, and the First World War caused their destruction. Okay, so that's a little bit, again, on the Habsburgs. Now, let's look at some of these famous families. 11 famous historical families with eerie curses you can't deny. First one is the Kennedy's curse, may be the most infamous. The Kennedy curse is one of the most documented cases of a family curse. Heartache and tragedy span through generations of the Kennedy family tree. In the late 1940s, Joseph Kennedy Jr. and Kathleen Kennedy Cavendish both perished in plane crashes. Rosemary Kennedy struggled for years with developmental issues, leading to a tragic lobotomy that only made things worse before passing in 2005. John F. Kennedy was supposed to turn the family's luck around, and most were optimistic when he became the U.S. president. However, his presidency ended in a catastrophe when Lee Harvey Oswald fatally shot him in 1963. 5 years after JFK's assassination, a lone gunman named Sirhan Sirhan murdered his younger brother, Robert Kennedy, in Los Angeles. 2 of Robert Kennedy's children perish in a tragic incident, one in the 80s of a drug overdose, the other in the 90s to a skiing mishap. Additionally, in 1990, John F. Kennedy Jr., JFK's son, lost his life along his wife and sister-in-law in a plane crash. So, are the Kennedys haunted? Is there a family curse of the Kennedys? I don't know. But certainly a long series of misfortune and events. I have no idea about that. This is just an article. I'm not endorsing this article. This is purely for fun. Legend says the Grimaldi family was cursed by witches. Grimaldi was once the most powerful families in Genoa, eventually becoming lords of Monaco in the 15th century. In the 13th century, however, a witch supposedly cursed the Grimaldi name as recompense for a vicious act committed by Lord Rainer. According to the legend, he assaulted a young girl, and she later learned the ways of witchcraft. She used her knowledge of the dark arts to ensure that no Grimaldi would ever find happiness in marriage. The curse may have manifested in something far more sinister, considering that Princess Grace, the wife of Prince Rainer II, passed in a 1982 car crash. Her daughter Stephanie, who survived the incident, endured one failed marriage and several other failed relationships later in life. Grace's other daughter, Caroline, also had a tumultuous love life with an early divorce, a second husband who died in a speedboat incident, and a third husband, a prince, with the reputation of aggression and medical problems. The Von Eyck family curse left one surviving son. Now, again, are these real? I don't know. This is about a wrestling family here in the U.S. We're going to skip that one. The Nepalese royal family curse lasted 10 generations. Now, this one's really interesting. In 2001, Prince Dipendra of the royal family of Nepal shot his parents and 8 other people before turning the gun on himself. That is... let's see. Yeah, it's... Oh, well. I thought I had a better image of them. I guess not. Okay, I guess not. I lied. No, there is one somewhere. Let me find it real quick. It's of them with their freaking guns. Where is it? It must be in this one. Yeah, here it is. This is the Nepalese royal family. So, old boy right here killed his whole family, okay? So back in 2001, the entire world was shocked when Nepalese Crown Prince Dipendra shot and killed his father, mother, and 7 other members of the royal family before turning the gun on himself. It had been speculated that he was distraught over his family's refusal to accept his bride and had been drinking heavily before the massacre took place. So we see potentially substance abuse playing a factor here. The prince lapsed into a 3-day coma, during which he proclaimed king before passing away. His uncle Gayendra became king and ruled for a number of years in a period marked by turbulence and conflict before the monarchy was finally abolished in favor of a democratic republic in 2008. Some superstitious citizens, however, were less surprised by the outcome, since the end of the monarchy had already been predicted a long time ago. Gorakhanth was a yogi in the 11th century who supposedly had supernatural powers. He is said to have been the protector of Gorkha, which is where King Gayendra's forefathers came from. Legend has it that the first king of a unified Nepal, Prithvi Naran Shah, once came into contact with the yogi in the forest and offered him some food. The yogi accepted the food, chewed it up, and then spit it out. Gorankha told the king to eat it, but the king refused. The food ended up dropping to the ground, and because of this disrespectful act, the yogi concluded that the kingdom would cease to exist after 10 generations, as foretold. Dipendra, the 10th generation, and Gayendra, the 9th generation, actually became the last kings of Nepal. Pretty interesting stuff. The Guinness family. Here's another one, the Guinness family. The Guinnesses, one of Ireland's most accomplished clans and famous brewers of the Guinness beer brand, had their share of bad luck throughout history. After Guinness was born in Kildare, Ireland in 1725, he crafted the beer that made him rich in 1759. After he married in 1761, Guinness and his wife had 21 children. Dang, that wife. She was successful. 21 children? 21 children. Are you kidding me? 11 of whom died before they even reached adulthood. That is not good odds. However, This isn't considered the beginning of the curse because life expectancies were quite low in the 16th century. Whispers of a curse surrounding the Guinness family began when his family started suffering from unnatural deaths, suicide, and alcoholism. And that's, again, as I said earlier, that's basically the sort of motif and pattern that surrounds these families. Something negative happens, they get off track. Again, as Christians, we would say they violate God's will. And then, bad, unfortunate events ensue. So let's hear more about the Guinness family. One of Guinness's grandchildren fell into alcoholism, and 2 more were committed to mental institutions. In the mid-1950s, his descendant, Lord Moyne, was killed by terrorists, and his son's wife, Deanna Mitford, left him and their children. In 1966, Patrick Brown ran a red light and died as he struck a van. In 1978, Henrietta Guinness was injured in a car crash with her boyfriend. She then went to Italy in her mid-30s and jumped off a bridge. In the 70s, Dennis Guinness was arrested and charged for waving a firearm at someone, but was found dead soon after he returned to his home on bail. That same year, John Guinness was in a car accident, and one of his sons was killed while another was injured. Paul Shannon's daughter, Olivia, died from a drug overdose. In 1986, Robert Hesketh also died in overdose in 2004, followed by Count Gottfried in 2007. Interesting. Okay, the Hemingway family. Everybody knows Ernest Hemingway, but did he actually cause a series of misfortunate events on top of his own family generation due to his own moral transgressions? Well, let's read. The Hemingway family. Even a brief glance into this bloodline showcases one clinical curse: severe depression. Clarence Edmonds Hemingway was born in 1871 and died by his own hand at his home in 1928. Now, Hemingway was also an alcoholic, and this was a known thing. Guys, smash that like for everybody who's still here if you enjoy the stream. This suicide was the first of a series of suicides within the family tree. At 29, his son, Ernest Hemingway's literary career was just taking off when Clarence died. Ernest went on to earn a Nobel Prize, Pulitzer's, wealth, and international fame. However, these accolades were not enough to keep him from attempting to walk into the spinning blades of a twin-engine plane before eventually killing himself with a shotgun at age 62. Ernest's brother, Leicester, died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in 1982. 5 years later, his sister Ursula, who struggled with cancer and depression, committed suicide with an overdose. The granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway, Marielle Hemingway, was born after Ernest's notable suicide. Marielle grew up with alcoholic parents, yet managed to make a name for herself as an actress. She explored her family's grim legacy in 2 novels and is also plagued by the family's curse of mental illness. Marielle's mother, Byra, died of cancer in 1988, and her father, Jack, died in late 2000 after heart surgery. Her older sister, Margue, battled depression and addiction throughout her life, and her drug dependence ultimately led to an overdose of barbiturates in her early 40s. Marielle's younger sister, Muffet, was a schizophrenic and a heavy drug user in her teen years. Okay. Crispy Johnson says maybe it's not a generational curse, it's a money curse. Well, and isn't that so interesting though? But isn't that so consistent with our Christian theology, right? That the suffering, our suffering is what brings us closer to God, right? Christ is the perfect image of a man who chose God's will and suffered, was self-sacrificing for the world. And when we look at these family curses, rarely does it ever happen, to non-notable families, because who would know, right? Who would know a family who's not notable? So all our examples are going to be famous families. But the wealth, right? It's something about the wealth. And yet it's not all wealthy families. But there's something about the wealth and the opulence that allows a sort of comfortability, again, the sort of addiction, the transgression of a sort of Christian morality. And is that the reason why then these men, because it always begins with the men, right? Again, just as the Bible said, the sins of the father are what going to follow for 3 to 4 generations. It's the sins of the father, just like the fall began with with Adam, right? Eve ate the apple. Creation didn't fall. It fell with Adam. It fell with Adam. And so are these family curses. And so are our nations, right? When we look at America and we're talking about the West and the Western man and the lack of masculinity and the lack of tradition. And, I was wanting to do a stream like, for men, what is it that you're willing to die for? I was thinking about this. I need to think about it more. I don't know if it's worthy of a stream topic, but, asking somebody, what is it that you're willing to die for? And is this question a sort of good question to see where somebody's values are, and where at what point are they selfless, or is the whole thing selfish? Right? I don't know, but the whole money thing, it is interesting that again it all begins with the sins of the father. It all begins with the sins of the men. Right? And God gives us the blessings, which are the family lines. And then through our own sins, then he slowly ends those family lines. I mean, he doesn't do it. We do it through our own sins, right? These are the consequences from our own decisions. Here's the next one, the Wadiyar royal family. The Wadiyar curse was placed on Raja Wadiyar of the Mysore kingdom by Alamalama in the 15th century. She is said to have cursed him not once, but 3 times. Alamalama was the wife of King Tirumala, who ruled the Vijayanagara Empire before Wadiyar came into power. At that time, Raja, the 9th ruler of the Wadiyar dynasty, and his forces had routed her husband's army and forced them to abandon their base. They defeated a couple... yada, yada, yada. Okay. Just before death, she pronounced a 3-part curse wherein Talakad would become a desert and a nearby town of Malangi would become a whirlpool area where the Wadiyars would have no offspring. While the curse had not played out exactly as Alamalama detailed after her death, it has become eerily close to complete fruition. Talakadu has become a desert. The river near Malangi commonly sees whirlpools, and the Wadiyar family has only birthed 1 male child in alternate generations, leading to very problematic issues regarding successions to the throne. Okay, we got the Habsburgs. It says a little bit more about the Habsburgs. Obviously, we read a little bit. The House of the Habsburg seriously suffered. Historically, the family has been on the wrong end of not 1, but 2 curses. One curse actually originated with a gift in the 11th century. A man named Count von Altenburg built a sanctuary of ravens called Vulture Mountain. About 100 years later, some Habsburg family members made some renovations to the tower that the ravens were not too fond of. The ravens began attacking members of the Habsburg family, and so the family killed the birds. From then on, ravens were always spotted at the tragedies that befell the Habsburg family members, such as Marie Antoinette, Duchess of Alsace, Archduchess of Charlotte, and her husband Maximilian. The second curse was placed on the Habsburg family by Countess Caroli in 1848 when Francis Joseph of Austria was violently quelling the Hungarian rebellion. The Countess' son was part of a group of Hungarian rebels that was captured and held hostage. The rebels promised the prisoners' lives would be spared at the cost of their freedom. However, the prisoners were executed despite this promise. The Countess then placed a curse on Francis Joseph that came to fruition in time. His wife and son were murdered, his nephew was assassinated, and the empire was consumed by conflict. Okay, the Kennedy family, we already mentioned that, all the mysterious deaths. The Onassis family. It is really possible for a cure to transfer from one family to another. According to some Greeks, that's essentially what happened when JFK's widow, Jackie Kennedy, brought the infamous Kennedy curse with her when she married Greek shipping tycoon Aristotle Onassis in 1968. According to them, that curse was brought about the untimely death of Aristotle's son, Alexander. He was killed in a plane crash in 1973. From there, it went downhill for the rest of the Onassis family. Aristotle's first wife, Alexander's mother, killed herself a year later after her son's death. She was followed a year later by Aristotle, who died a sick and broken man. Alexander's sister, Christina, also died in 1988 of a heart attack due to depression. As for the once magnificent Onassis financial empire, that too crumbled away. The remnants were given to the last surviving member of the family, Christina, daughter of Athena. The heiress has so far managed to avoid the infamous curse, living in relative obscurity with her husband, Alvaro Alfonso de Miranda Neto, and her 2 stepchildren in Brazil. Okay. And then the number 1 is the Von Erich family. Dubbed the Kennedys of the wrestling world in the 1980s, the Von Erichs and their patriarch Fritz, real name Jack Atkinson, experienced their first loss when the eldest of 6 male children, 6-year-old Jack Jr., was accidentally electrocuted and drowned in a puddle of wet snow near their home. Afterward, a chain of disasters befell the family. Fritz's 3rd child, David, died from a serious case of gastrionitis, while Carrie, 4th, Michael, 5th, and Chris, 6th, all committed suicide via drug overdose. Only Fritz's 2nd child, Kevin, lived to continue wrestling before retiring in 1993. Now, the 3rd generation of Von Erichs, Kevin's 2 sons and Carrie's daughter, currently following their grandfather's footsteps, we can only hope that they avoid the curse that almost destroyed their bloodline. Okay. Well, guys, that is going to do tonight's stream. This is the stream on generational curses, biblical theology, and black magic spells. We discussed swear words, curse words, profanity. We talked about Maleficent and Sleeping Beauty. We talked about black magic, voodoo, contagion magic. And we also talked about the Bible. We read in Exodus, we read in Deuteronomy, we read in Numbers, and we read in Genesis. 4 different books of the Old Testament describing how God again curses to 3 and 4 generations for the sins of the fathers. But what we learn is that God doesn't actually curse people. What he does is he allows their choice of their sin to have negative consequences on their generation. Again, indicative of how we understand Adam, right? I am not guilty for what Adam did in Orthodox theology, but I inherit the consequences of the fall. And in the same way as how Orthodoxy and Christianity would understand generational curses and the sins of the father. And this is why men specifically have to get in a relationship with God, have to acquire these traditional values so that they can be the pillars of their families and God can give them generational blessings. And that generational blessing is a man who listens and follows God's word and abides by his commandments. And by doing so, you belong to the family of God. You are in the in-group. And this is the difference between Cain as the wanderer and the fugitive who's left outside, in a sense, the family of God. And this was due to his hard heart, his lack of repentance. And so this kind of sums up, again, our conversation today. A major thank you again to Pim Orsovs. Thank you so much, Pim, for sponsoring today's stream. I really, really appreciate it. Again, Pim is the real 2-time, not Dr. Disrespect. Pim Orsovs. This is the second stream that he has sponsored. First one was the Khazarian stream, and this one is the Generational Curse stream. So, guys, smash that like. Thank you all for being here. And I'm going to dive into some of these super chats. Whew, man, I feel like I've been for solid. My mouth is worn out. First super chat comes from the Great Tone 5150. Super chat at $9.99. It says, "Thank you for covering the subject. I felt cursed my entire life." Well, the Great the great one, 5150. No need to worry that you are cursed, brother, because God has you. All you have to do is have a repentant heart, a soft heart for God, come to him, and these curses can't befall you. You see, God gives you the ultimate amulet, right? Not the evil eye of protection, not the Hamsa eye, but his guardian protection. And so if you do feel cursed, don't worry, brother. All you have to do is get in line with God, follow Christ, and you will be good. You'll be good to go. So thank you so much, the great one, 51051, first super chat I've ever received from the great one, and throws in $9.99, says, thank you for covering the subject. I felt cursed my entire life. Well, brother, hopefully if you're here, you're not cursed anymore, right? You are moving in the right direction. So thank you so much for the super chat. God bless you. Next super chat comes from Rock, throws in $1 and says, banned for asking how to be saved. So can you talk about the simple truth that some people are born stupid because it is from the genes or generation/DNA? Okay, so Rock must have been that Protestant who was judging us. He was going to judge if we had a right heart because apparently Rock has the correct Protestant theology. So he was banned, yes, and rightfully so, because you're not going to come here and start judging people in the chat. Like, what an obnoxious thing to do, right? What an obnoxious thing to do, to come into a live chat and tell everybody you're judging them based on, I don't know, your interpretation of whatever. So he says, banned for asking how to be saved. So you can talk about the simple truth that some people are born stupid because it is from the genes or generate. Like what? The guy never even asked a question. It sounds like I made the right decision on banning you, brother. I don't know what the heck you're saying, right? Don't come in here telling people that you're judging them. And I probably wouldn't ban you from my live chat. You can disagree with us. All you have to do is be respectful, be cordial. Don't come in here being obnoxious. So interesting stuff for sure. Let's see here. Okay, next super chat comes from the Green Feathers. Shout out to Nicholas of the Green Feathers. God bless you, brother. Hope you are doing well. God bless you and the family. The Green Feathers throws in $10 and says, cursing phrases in Irish Gaelic were/are very common. In a song called Bean Fighting are the lyrics. May your legs be broken, be broken. May your legs be broken. Python's wife, may your legs be broken, be broken. May your legs and your bones be broken. Very interesting. Okay. That is totally consistent again with our understanding of the Irish sort of cursing contest. So again, the Green Feathers, Nick from the Green Feathers, he's been to Ireland. So I believe our local Irishman, Dr. Crispy Johnson, is also from Ireland. So they can give a yay or nay whether this is also the case of, it seems like cursing. And that's where like bardic, the bards of Ireland, right? Irish culture, Gaelic language, Gaelic culture, ancient Ireland has the Druid, it has an old tradition of magic. And so a bard, this is often people claim this is why Irishmen have the gift of gab. This is in their quote unquote DNA, that Irishmen are so sort of good with words and whatnot. Maybe so. I know that's certainly what Terence McKenna used to say, is that his facility of language was due to his Irish origins and his sort of bardic disposition, if you will. So the Green Feathers, shout out to Nick and the family, throws in $10 and says, cursing phrases in Irish Gaelic were/are very common. and a song called Being Fighting, which I'm probably totally butchering, I apologize, are the lyrics, quote, "May your legs be broken, may your legs be broken. Python's wife, may your legs be broken, may your legs and your bones be broken." All right. Oh, Louise Delahunty says Irish too can confirm the gift of gab. Well, maybe it's real. Maybe it is in your guys' genes. Who knows? Jose Garza throws in our last super chat. Let me see on Rockfin if we got any. No, Rockfin does not have any super chats. So this looks like that's going to be our last super chat for the evening. Jose Garza, shout out to Josu Garza. Thank you so much, brother, for the super chat. Has been a continual supporter. Josu Garza throws in $10 and says, "Brujeria and Santeria is very common in my Mexican culture. My great grandma practices cleansings and I think that's readings. Low key, I think it has something to their Catholic upbringing. In my view, it tends to just cloak old deities and Christian names." Great stream, DPH. Well, Josu Garza, you know what? I don't disagree with you. Actually, there was a video by National Geographic I was watching again in preparation. I couldn't show it because it'd get the stream taken down. But it was exactly about that. It was about the black magic that's prevalent within Mexican markets. And so, obviously, what is it? Like Santa Muerte? Isn't like the saint of death? Or this is like a common thing within Mexican culture is that they have like the Catholic candle that they burn to different saints, like Saint Guadalupe, or whatever her name was. I don't know. I don't know if she's a saint or not. I don't know what it is in Catholicism, but she has candles, and so there's all these different Catholic candles. And if you go to these markets, there's a real phenomenon within Mexican culture to burn these candles to like the spirit of death or the saint of death. I forget. It's something Muerte, and you get things in exchange. So if you want money, if you need something, you ask the sort of this entity of death to do it. And so this is part of the sort of Mexican culture, which is wrapped in, like you said, it's this weird weaving of Catholicism and sort of traditional, magical Mexican, Mazatec religion or something like that. So very, very interesting stuff, no doubt. But Josu Garza, thank you so much, brother, for the super chat. Again, that is the last super chat that I'm seeing here. Guys, smash that like. I just want to give a special thanks to everybody who is still here. Really, really appreciate it. Again, let me give a special shout out to all the super chatters too. Josu Garza, thank you, brother. The Green Feathers throws in a $10. Let me read also Josu Garza's real quick again. So Josu Garza said, "Brujeria and Santeria is very common in my Mexican culture. My great grandma practices cleansings and it says residing. I think it's reading. Low key, I think it has something to do with their Catholic upbringing. In my view, it tends to just cloak old deities and Christian names." Great stream, DPH. All right. Thank you so much, Josu Garza. Shout out to the Green Feathers. Nick, God bless you, man. Hope the family's doing well. Again, he pointed out that cursing is, in fact, very common in Irish culture, both now and back in the day. Rock throws in $1 and says, "Banned for asking how to be saved." The reason I banned you, brother, is because obviously you believe in sola fide. We don't believe in sola fide. You start going on about works and all this stuff. Like, we're Orthodox here. Okay. So if you don't agree, that's fine. You can hang out, but don't start posting about how everybody's wrong and you got the right answers. Like, again, it's not wanted here. So yeah. And then based on your question here, it doesn't even make sense. I don't even know what you're talking about. So can you talk about the simple truth that some people are born stupid because it is from their genes and their generation DNA? Exactly. That's why Orthodoxy doesn't believe in a sort of age of reason. So if you're a Protestant or you're a Western Christian, one of the big problems is you're assuming that to be a Christian and follow Christ, you have to have some sort of rational pronouncement and then you can become a Christian. Well, in Orthodoxy, we don't do that. We believe as soon as you're born, you're part of our family. And so we do 40 days and then you're baptized, because even as an infant, you still have human nature and you can then participate in the sacraments. Protestantism isn't a sacramental religion. Maybe you can point to the high forms of Protestantism. And so, yeah, somebody born with a mental disability does not have a problem at all for Orthodoxy. What it would have a problem, though, is if you believe that there's an age of reason in which you can officially become a Christian. That's a bit of a problem. So anyways, moving on. Then shout out to our first super chatter, which was the great one, 5150 for the $9.99 super chat. So guys, that is going to conclude tonight's stream. God bless everyone. Shout out to Dr. Crispy Johnson. Shout out to Thomas Henderson. Shout out to Slow Boy Whiteboard. Shout out to Kristen. Hope you're doing well. Shout out to Del Bridge. Del Bridge. Hope you're doing well, brother. Looks like all the usual good people. Shout out to Day Jire here in the chat. Shout out to Jack. I'm not sure who you are, but welcome, brother. Shout out to Louise Delahunty. Glad you're here. And shout out to everybody else. So anyways, with that, smash that like. I'm going to hop off here, guys. Again, major thank you to Pim Orsos for today's stream, for sponsoring today's stream. I really appreciate it, man. This was a fun topic to dive into, and I'm sure it'll be useful for other people. So God bless you, Pim. Thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. Oh, we got one more super chat. One more super chat just came in from Harry Serpanos. Harry Serpanos throws in $10. Thank you so much, Harry. And he says, God bless you, mate. Was in a meeting and just realized you went live. Well, thank you so much, Harry Serpanos. I have been live for now 2 hours and 4 minutes. And so I am going to hop off here and enjoy the rest of my Wednesday evening. Gosh, I can't even remember what day it is. I'll be back Friday. However, not Friday evening. So I'm thinking about, I'm either going to do a stream on, I'm thinking maybe a Friday morning stream. And I got a few topics here. I don't know what to do. I got a topic I'd like to do that I presented at Jay's. I may save that actually, because I may be presenting at Jay's book signing in Austin, and I may use the same topic and maybe dive a little bit deeper into it. That is the most magical century in European history that I talked about. But I was thinking about doing one on people that don't have an internal monologue, and call it, I don't know what I'm going to title it, but I realized there's an article of people talking about how they don't have an internal monologue. And then I saw these things on TikTok and these Instagram videos of these girls and guys saying that they don't have a voice in their head. And I started to think about how that relates to conscience and what the historical and theological understanding, not just as Christians, but within history of ideas. What is the conscience? What is the voice inside your head? And this has often been associated with our connection with God. And this has also often been the voice that tells us right and wrong. And so if people are now, or maybe it's always been this way, I don't know. I'm going to dive into this topic. I thought it'd be something interesting to research. That they have no internal monologue. They have no voice inside their head. Does that mean, how does that relate to the conscience? How does that relate to decision making? How does that relate to the relationship to God? How does that relate then to buying into a lot of the propaganda and the sort of debauchery that we see in the world today? I don't know. But it's very interesting, right? Because when I think, I'm constantly putting ideas forth, going back and forth with myself. Is it talking with myself? Is the conscience something else? I don't know. That's something I might dive into. I might do that Friday morning. I got a handful of topics. And then don't forget, we're going to be doing Buddhism for the next Introduction to World Religions course. We're going to be diving into Buddhism. And also, we got 2 more sponsored streams. I'll be diving into this book, Christ the Eternal Tao. Somebody asked for a fuller explanation and a run through of Christ the Eternal Tao, which we will do. And then the third one, we will be diving into this book here. Sorry, got a bunch of books everywhere. Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community. So we'll be going, doing a stream over on some of this book. That will be the third sponsored stream. So we got a lot of content coming here soon. So anyways, I'm hopping off here, guys. Smash that like. Thank you all so much. Shout out to Harry Serpano. Shout out to Josu Garza. Shout out to Nicholas from the Green Feathers. Go subscribe. Shout out to Nick, or Rock, though we don't agree. Thanks for the $1. And shout out to the Great 1510. God bless you all. Have a wonderful night. And I will see you either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. One of those days. Definitely going to have a stream.